Good morning to all, and welcome to this webinar. I'm Suresh Iyengar, and I'm a business advisor with the North Central Texas Small Business Development Center. Today is National Taco Day and National Homemade Cookie Day. Two great reasons for you to celebrate. We are the leading provider of assistance for small businesses. We are grant funded, which allows us to offer services at no cost to you, the business owner or entrepreneur. Quick reminder, we will be recording this webinar and adding it to our YouTube channel. Today's webinar will be interactive, so please feel free to raise your hand, which is the small button at the bottom, if you have a question or comment. Our presenter today is CJ Ballinger with 25 plus years of boots on the ground experience in HR. CJ knows HR solutions that work for employers. She started her career with the Texas Workforce Commission in unemployment claims, and over the years has served businesses in employee relations, recruitment, and safety. She started My HR Consulting in 2012 to focus on serving small businesses. She is a certified senior HR professional, SPHR, a graduate, St. Mary's University MBA, and an OSHA authorized instructor. Her workshops include HR tools and tips designed for small businesses. Today's presentation is titled Generations in the Workplace. Please take it away from here, CJ. You're not audible. I think you're on mute. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see my presentation. Thank you so much, Suresh, for the lovely introduction. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to present this information. I think that there are a lot of small businesses who are befuddled on this topic. And so hopefully I'll be able to shed some light for small businesses. But I want to say that I'm not just a presenter, I am also a client. When I went to start my small business over 10 years ago, I was able to get a small business advisor, and that person has been so instrumental in my business. It was just like having a partner in business, someone to help me with making decisions. So I highly encourage you that if you have not signed up to talk to an advisor, do it. It's no cost to you, and it can really help you grow your business. So that's my spiel. So let's talk about today's topic. I hear a lot over I don't know, maybe the last 10 years or so, I've heard a lot of people talk. I go to business meetings, mixers, trade shows, and people are all talking about the same thing. And that is the difference between older generations and younger generations in the workforce. And some of that includes just stereotypes that generations have against each other, and a real focus on the differences, and that can create some headaches for small business owners, can create some conflicts, employee relation issues. And so what I'd like to do is talk you through what exactly does this all mean? What is it all about? and how can you manage your small business through it? Because it's here. Let's just face it, it's here. So we're going to talk about understanding the generation gap, right? What exactly is that about? We're going to talk about the different generations, what happened when they were in their early adulthood years, late teens, early adulthood years. We're going to talk about the generational values. Hopefully, you'll be able to, at the end of this session, make a direct connection between how generations have developed their values based on what they experienced as a youth. So there is a reason for it, in other words. We're going to talk about performance management because it's nice to know all this information, but what do you do with it? And then we're going to talk about some tips that you can use to try and help connect with your employees and help them connect with each other. My disclaimer is I'm not an attorney. I can't give legal advice. I can just pass along the nuts and bolts of what I've seen that's worked when it comes to human resources. So let's talk about it. What exactly is a generation gap? We've all heard that term. That term comes from a gentleman named Kingsley Davis, and he coined the term generation gap in the 1940s. His intention really was to describe the gap or difference between parents and their teens, right? Anybody who's had a teenager, it scratches their mind on that one, whether from 50 years ago or today. All right, but the generation gap was intended to explain the difference between someone who was in their teen years and still growing up and an adult that's in their late 30s, early 40s, basically a teen and their parent. So the understanding is that really this gap is almost like insurmountable. Like you can't get over the gap because the two generations are so different that they don't have anything in common, and their values, their lifestyle, their attitudes towards life and work, specifically work, is just so different that they should never meet in the middle. But let's break that down and see if that is actually accurate or not. Let's talk about the generations for starter. Like that. So this is fast forwarding 2024, and I've got on here 6 generations. The last generation, Gen Alpha, we're not going to talk about because they're not old enough to work just yet. We're not into child labor, but we're going to talk about the other 5 because, in fact, all 5 of these generations are working together in the workforce. So you've got your builders. They were born in 1946 or earlier. They are also called the silent generation. And they're also, a lot of people refer to them as the greatest generation. And we'll talk about why that is here in just a little bit. The next one is baby boomers, or boomers for short. They were born between 1946 and 1964. My mother was born in 1946, so she was the first baby boomer. And so she ended up with some Gen Xers to deal with. Gen X is from 1965 to 1979, and they are all often referred to as Xers or Gen Xers. And I had always wondered why X, right? Because I'm Gen X, right? And I wonder, like, what where'd the X come from? So the term Generation X was actually thought of, popularized by a Canadian journalist, and he actually took it from a book called A Guide Through the American Status System. And it was in that book that X was used to refer to a group of people who did not wish to concern themselves with societal pressures, money, and status. All right. I'm not sure that's a fair stereotype, but whatever. That's where the name came from. And so you're going to find that millennials who were born from 1980 to 1994, they're called Gen Y. So we just go right down the alphabet. Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z. Gen Z is also called Zoomers or iGen because they were the first generation to grow up with cell phones. And so they are steeped in technology, and they were born between 1995 and 2009. Gen Alpha really almost starts the alphabet over again, but it's based upon the Greek alphabet. So here we are with 5 generations. We'll call them builders, boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z, or something like that, right? Just don't call me a middle child. That's all I ask. Okay, so here we go. Here are the generations that are in the workplace, all mixing and mingling, and all have very different values about work, about family, about life, about morals, all of these things. So let's talk about what happened, what is driving all these differences between the generations. So let's start with the builders. The builders were born before 1946, and what are some of the things that influenced them? So think back to, what was going on in the 1940s, 1930s. You had World War II, you had the Great Depression. Then after the war ended, you had this advent of technology and economic prosperity that made the 50s a great decade to grow up in for a lot of people. So the builders were the first to see the television, and I always heard, word has it, that the TV show called Bonanza, that it was popular because it was the first color TV program that came out. And so here you had this brand new technology before, when President Roosevelt, FD Roosevelt, when he would do his fireside chats during World War II, he wasn't talking into a TV, he was speaking on the radio. And so it was a huge deal for the builders to see the advent of the television, the appliances in the house, what kind of cultural influences, big band, swing. That was the kind of music, the advent of jazz. So all of these things are kind of growing and molding and shaping the builders. And what they became about was conformance, which we will talk about in one moment. So let's talk about what happened when the boomers were growing up. you're talking not World War II, but you are talking Vietnam, right? And not only was it, a devastating war, but there was a lot of political uprising at that time. And there was a totally different uh, attitude towards veterans coming home from having served their country. And so it was a complete shift in 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 terms of the public's attitude towards war and towards this particular war. You saw the advent of civil rights. So in the early 1960s, that's when you saw legislation passed for civil rights. That's when you saw a lot of civil rights marches and um, uh, just a lot of uh, pushback against the status quo. It's kind of like our society reached a breaking point and the public stopped trusting their politicians, perhaps. I know Watergate happened in the early 70s. And so, maybe because of technology, people started questioning, what are we doing? Something needs to change, right? And so the boomers were all about questioning authority and change. What did they like? Wide variety here. The one thing I could think of was Woodstock. So not all the boomers were in Woodstock, but it was that kind of vibe. It was the flower power hippie vibe that a lot of boomers were into. That was part of questioning authority. So you saw the advent of rock and roll, like Beatles, Rolling Stones, Elvis, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, The Doors. All those were, and I know I'm not doing justice to all the others that were out there, but I'm just trying to think of the things that were in the culture at the time that the baby boomers were growing up that would have influenced their way of thinking, their way of approaching life and approaching work. So here comes the Gen Xers. One of the things I want to point out is that something that was a shift between the boomers and the builders is that when it came time for, let me back up here. When it came time for the builder generation to step up and fight World War II, uh, a lot of housewives went and worked in the factories and supplied labor for the war. And that started the Rosie the Riveter cult, right? But when veterans came back from the war, they went to work, and most of the Rosie Riveters went back to the household and raised their kids. So then you fast forward to the boomers. They're like, I don't want to stay at home. They're like, the world is my oyster. So a lot of boomers had both parents were working both. And so that leads us to Gen Xers, excuse me. Gen Xers are also known as latchkey kids. The reason why is because both parents were working, and after school, they would come home and let themselves in. So think about the impression that would have made on Gen Xers, how that would have influenced them and their family values. So Xers were born between 65 and 79. They would have seen a Desert Storm. might have served in Desert Storm. They also would have seen the advent of technology. Not a lot. They were at the very beginning. They were the early adopters. But during their late teen, early 20 years, you would see the advent of personal computers where you could go to the store for the first time ever and buy a computer and have it in your house. They saw the advent of cable TV because, when I was growing up, really, we used the rabbit ears and we would stick tin foil on the rabbit ears and then try and figure out how to get the best signal, right? So Gen Xers got the advantage of a cable and of the advent of the internet. And for their cultural reference, they referred a lot to things like MTV. So the video industry started taking over. And if somebody had a song on the radio, it really almost didn't exist unless they had a video to go with it on MTV. They didn't get noticed. And so that's when you start seeing technology start to shift how people go about their lives. They were not steeped in technology because Gen Xers are also known as the middle child. They're also known as free range kids. I remember the rule of thumb when I was growing up was that after school, we would play outside and then we had to come in when the street lights come on. That's not the way of life today. But if you go back to the Gen Xers and possibly some millennials, you'll see that that was their experience. It was a little free range. Their parents didn't always know where they were at, but they saw the advent of technology in the home, but they weren't, they didn't have it their whole lives. Let's just say that. So millennials, what was going on with them? So 1980 to 94, when they were young adults, they would have lived through 9/11. How scary is that for a young adult, somebody who's coming of age, wanting to go out and make their way in the world? And then 2001, 9/11 happens, and that really shook their sense of safety in the world. Along with that, a little bit later was the Great Recession of 2008. They were a little bit older by then, but still that was very shaky because these were things that hadn't happened before. I think 2008 scared people into thinking, wait, are we going to be going back to the 1930s and the Great Depression? So a lot of millennials got shook in their early years over what was going on in the world. What influenced them growing up? Social media. So the millennials, whereas the Gen Xers were kind of at the beginning of it. They saw the advent of personal computers in the home. Millennials got the full advantage of that. They were one of the first to be able to jump on to MySpace, Facebook, you name it, all the social media. And they had an affinity for being able to connect and make friends with their peers. That is one aspect of the millennials that seems to be true, is that for them is that they are interested in connecting with other people, with their peers, people of their own age. What kind of music influenced them? I put Coldplay, but there's so many. I mean, okay, I'll say it, Spice Girls. All right. They would have listened to Spice Girls. They would have listened to some grunge, some indie. So millennials are all over the place, but what it is that they do have a few songs that and few groups that they have in common. So here are the millennials, and you say, well, they got into social media. We thought that that was the young ones, the teenagers. So what about Gen Z? So Gen Z is known as a digital generation because they are the first generation to grow up with technology their whole lives. Think about it. They would have never known a world without cell phones. And so that is something that is separates them in terms of their experience with technology. It also makes them especially adept at using technology. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this generation also sadly grew up with a lot of gun violence. So as they were growing up, they would have been exposed to uh, probably their whole educational experience. They would have been exposed to stories of gun violence in schools. And so Gen Z, you know, doesn't necessarily trust or feel safe uh, uh, in terms of allowing other people to trusting other people that they're going to, take care of them in institutions. So Gen Z really kind of brings an independent spirit to the mix. They listen to indie music. Their cultural influence is going to be more TikTok or YouTube and or SoundCloud, and they're going to be fans of bands and performers, musicians who are just in their in the basement of their parents' home recording themselves, and making it big. Think of Billie Eilish, right? So Gen Z is going to be influenced by a lot of outside. They're the first global generation where they really were what was going on globally, nationally, had a direct impact on them and something that they were aware of. So, how did this all play out? So, let's talk about generational values. We talked about kind of what happened to help form these values. Let's talk about what happened. Builders are work hard, sacrifice, conform. Don't complain, don't question the rules, don't ask why, just nose to the grindstone. Do what you have to do, right? If you've got to work 2 jobs to support your family, you do it, right? So builders were all about duty. Boomers, on the other hand, were more skeptical. They questioned authority. When they go to work, they really threw themselves into it. Mom and dad were going to work, right? And they were, it was important for them to feel fulfilled and feel like that they had a cause and that's something that to believe in, possibly something that to believe in that they could fight for. So that's the boomers mentality is look, we have got to make a difference with our lives and we've got to work. It was kind of the advent of the feminist movement. And so women were about going to work and working uh, jobs that were traditionally set aside for men. So Gen X, what happened? They were the latchkey kids of the world. So they grew up to be self-reliant, independent, skeptical of everything. The boomers would get behind something, get behind a cause, and go to bat for it. And the Gen Xers were like, I don't trust none of y'all, right? And so they flipped it around and they said, listen, my job is not my life. I work to live. And so I've seen Gen Xers take a pay cut so that they could work a job where they could be home for their kids' soccer game. That it was more important to them to have to kind of put a protective bubble around their family life than to make a good impression with the boss. So now Gen Y or millennials, they grew up in a gig economy. I don't know if you've heard that term. And so for millennials, they might be working an Uber job or doing 2 or 3 different contract jobs where they don't have any job security, they don't have any benefits, and they're just kind of piecing it together. So the Gen Y is very entrepreneurial. They're independent as well. They're sociable and they tend to be tolerant to other generations, and they're great at multitasking. So now here comes along Gen Z. Gen Z entered the workforce, just a few years ago. And they're all about social justice and being inclusive, having a diversity mindset, a diverse mindset. They tend to be tech savvy and they know their way around computers, mobile phones, technology in general, can figure it out. And for work, they like to be mobile. So this is an important piece of the puzzle for small businesses, because how many small businesses can offer remote work or even mobile work to their employees? And so if a Gen Z feels trapped behind a desk, they may not enjoy the work. They might prefer something where they could pick their laptop and go out to sit under a tree and work and enjoy nature, right? So that mobility and just inclusivity, getting along, is very important to them. Let's talk about why that might be, what some other things might be playing into that. The builders, respect for authority, discipline, duty. Boomers, optimism, it's going to be okay, question authority, push back. Gen X, skeptical, independent, and likes to enjoy life. Millennials tend to be confident in themselves or confident in their abilities. They tend to be realistic. They're optimistic, but not to the point that they put blinders on and ignore the realities of the world around them. But one thing that they do like is to have their peeps. They like to connect, and their village may be in person, their village may be online, they may have multiple tribes that they socialize with, but they are more likely to reach out to a peer if they need a shoulder to cry on than they would maybe to call their parents or brother or sister. so that creates a little bit of a shift. The Gen Z, they just want to be free of labels. Why do we have to label everything? Why do we, why do we have to stereotype and categorize and label everything and everyone, right? So they're not for a bunch of stereotypes or like paying their dues. I don't know if anybody's had that where older generations are like, oh, well, I had to pay my dues. So Gen Z is like, well, I can operate a computer better than you, so I've already paid my dues. So there could be a potential conflict right there. Gen Z also is big on social justice. They're aware of discrimination, discrepancies, racism, uh, gender stereotypes. They're keenly aware of all of that, and that all is factoring into their moral code, which then factors into how they view work. How do they handle finances? Builders didn't know what a credit card was. They saved and paid cash. Boomers, their idea was buy now, pay later, right? Let's just do it. Let's just move forward. We'll figure it out because they were optimistic. We're gonna get through this, right? Somehow, some way. Gen X is actually more cautious financially, more conservative financially than their boomer parents. So they're going to be more likely to save. They may have a credit card, but they're going to be more likely to pay it off, right? Gen Y, they earn to spend. Several years ago, there was a commercial, and there was a girl who saw a purse that she liked, and there was somebody with a fishing pole with $1 attached to it and said, if you change your insurance, you'll save $100. And she said, oh, good, I can get the purse, right? So older generations would have said, oh, good, I can save $100 and put it in the bank. So Gen Y is going to be about, okay, you can't take it with you. So if you get it, spend it. And so they're going to make good use of their money. Not to say that they're not responsible, but they are aware that you can't take it with you, and let's enjoy it while we can, right? Gen Z actually they're conservative, thoughtful spenders. They're ethical. And so what happens is that they'll do business with companies that they've researched and has like-minded values, right? How difficult is that to market to, right? So let's say that Gen Z wants to go out and purchase some shoes, and they find a company that makes recycled plastic shoes and supports the environment. That's what would motivate them to spend their money with a particular company. So it's not necessarily about the price. It's not about buy now, pay later. For them, it's about, okay, does my spending reflect my values, my core values? And that's what motivates them to spend. When it comes to family, builders were all work, no play. And I know that people are saying that boomers are no longer in the workplace, but they sure enough are. And so they're going to be nose to the grindstone, right? When it comes to boomers, they work hard and play hard. I don't know if you know people who are like that's their mantra. We're going to work hard and play hard and just go after life with gusto. Whereas the Gen Xers kind of pulled it back a little bit and said, wait, I need to have work-life balance, right? It's not all about work. It's not all about making the boss happy. Millennials came along and said, wait a minute, I'm going to tweak that a little bit. I need work-life fulfillment, meaning I need to feel good about what I'm doing at my job, not just balancing it, but feeling good about it. Here's the kicker, and this is a major deal. You've got to factor this in as a small business when you're dealing with your employees, especially hiring and retention, is that Gen Z saw how burnt out some of these older generations have gotten. They look and they go, wait a minute, work-life balance, does that mean that when I'm on vacation and I'm on the beach, that I'm going to have to take a call from my boss because I went to my kid's soccer game last week? And the Gen Z answer is no. They don't want to be called after hours. That's part of work-life separation. Work is work, life is life. And here's why, is because Gen Z does not want their work to define them. In times past, older generations, especially builders and boomers, what they did for a living was at the core of their identity. Gen Z is rejecting that and saying, my work is work and my life is life, and I don't want to be identified by just one thing. Remember, they don't like labels, right? And so they don't want to be identified with their work and what they do, and they don't want it bleeding into their after hours. So make a note of that. So generational values. Let's talk about in terms of their attention. So what gets their attention, especially at work? Builders are going to be the only ones reading the dusty old memos in your bulletin board. The ones that are all curled up in yellow, right? They're going to be the ones going by and checking the bulletin boards because they're used to seeing formal memos or in person. Think about it. When they were in their younger years, they didn't have email, right? So it's not something that they got used to when they were starting their careers. Boomers weren't used to email either when they started their careers. That was kind of a new thing. So boomers were, probably in their 30s, 40s when email became popular. So they really prefer either in person or phone. Phone they're comfortable with, texting, not their favorite thing, right? So I had a friend who, if I would text her, she would immediately turn around and call me, right? And so that's just what you're used to. Whereas Gen X got in on the ground floor of email, so Gen X loves some email. And they actually like social media as well. So what you'll find is that nowadays older generations are on Facebook, for example, whereas the younger generations have vacated because they're tired of the older generations spying on them, and they're tired of seeing what we've had for lunch and our dogs and our cats and all that stuff. So they have vacated. Moved on to greener pasture like Instagram or TikTok or YouTube. So if you want to communicate with a Gen Y or millennial, text or instant message is the way to go. Quick, 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 right? If I send an email to a millennial friend, it may never get read. Let's just be honest. It just sit there and grow dust on the internet. So text and instant message is good for millennials, but text is good for Gen Z, except that they don't want to see a whole novel in the form of a text. They prefer pictures, graphics, things that they can read right away. And ironically, because we talk about how much generations love technology and being on their phone and this huge stereotype, right? Gen Z has a preference for in person. They would rather sit down and talk to somebody over a cup of coffee than send them an email or an instant message. So that's kind of a stereotype, is that younger generations are glued to their phone and addicted to technology. But that stereotype is a bit of a myth when it comes to Generation Z. So you look at this and you're going, oh my goodness, what do I do with all this information? I've just taken a history lesson and I don't even know how to apply this to my small business. So here's what you do. Start out looking in the mirror. That saying, know thyself. Take a look in the mirror and say, who am I? What generation did I come from? What are my preferences for communication? You may want to take a look, and we talked about this a little bit in the last session. We'll go into it more in the next session about personality. Are you a get it done now type of person, or can't we just all get along type person? Do you have any barriers in your life that make communication difficult? Like, are you busy, stressed out? Are you stuck with between kids, parents, finances, all these things, maybe health issues, relationship issues? All those different things will influence how you manage. They'll influence how you behave as a person, and that will most definitely show up in your management style as a small business owner. So if you're having conflict in the workplace, the number one thing you need to do is just step back and look at yourself and say, how is this triggering me? And how can I step back and pull myself so I don't get back, so that I don't get sucked up into somebody else's drama. So stay calm, cool, and collected, and really be honest with yourself about where you're at in terms of your stress level, in terms of your personality, and maybe having a personality conflict with one of your employees, or maybe a generational gap issue. So how does that work? What happens is, I've heard a lot of older generations put down younger generations. And they talk about that they can't dress, that they have no loyalty. I mean, that's a big one, that younger generations have no loyalty, that, once the senior employees leave, these kids won't know what to do with themselves, because they don't know how to do their job. I hear a lot of, like, you got to pay your dues. And when I was first hired, I had to, right? And so, number one, maybe talk to your employees about finding a common ground and not putting each other down, not stereotyping. We're talking about some commonalities and tendencies within generations, but they're there because these generations had common experiences that shaped them. It doesn't make any one of the generations right or wrong. And a lot of the stereotypes that generations put on each other are a little bit exaggerated, if not just unfair. So let's take a look at that and get that out of your workplace. We don't need to be talking about paying your dues in the workplace, because that just comes across as an insult. All right, so have a plan. Have a written strategy for how you're going to hire, recruit, retain, motivate your employees to be productive. Have a written plan, have a written process. look at your process, and you can go back and look at some of the prior videos that we've done where we outline exactly how the hiring process works, where you can find good job candidates. Take a look at your own processes, match those up, and see if at any point in that process, if you're doing something that could turn off somebody that could be a potentially good hire for you. Scrub your processes, look and go, okay, am I, when I'm selling my business to a potential employee, what kind of impression am I making? And you can even approach it almost as a marketing plan, because that's really what it is in its heart, is that when you're going out to hire, you're marketing your business and your job and your culture to job candidates. And we have such a labor shortage right now that candidates can pick and choose, right? So, maybe a few years ago, if somebody quit their job, there might be 5 other people behind them applying. That's not the way it is today. It's not the world we live in today. So step back and take a look. Each touch point that you have with the candidate, are you inadvertently presenting yourself in a light that would be a turnoff to those generations? Communicate with purpose. Have a strategy for how you communicate with all the generations. Be familiar. And so let me give you an example of this. So let's say that there is bad weather on the way, and you need to communicate to your employees that you're going to open your business up an hour later. What do? Do you sit down and send an email? Do you send a smoke signal? Do you text? What do you include in that text? How you communicate that effectively might depend on the generation you're communicating to. So you may want to learn how to communicate with multiple mediums so that you can reach each person where they're at, reach each generation where they're at. So take a look and say, okay, how do I communicate with my employees? Because employees value regular, ongoing touch points, ongoing appreciation, not just we're gonna do a happy birthday this month, and we're gonna make a cake and ice cream, right? All right, see y'all next month. That doesn't cut it. It never did cut it. So if you want to have employees feel productive and jazzed, stoked to be at your company, show them ongoing appreciation. Take a look at what you have to offer, because small businesses aren't always able to pay top dollar. We're not always able to offer corporate America benefits, but that's not what a lot of employees may even be looking for. So perks like mental health benefits, financial wellness benefits, flexible work schedules, jeans Friday, right? Jean day, casual day, and just a mindset of diversity that you bake into the culture of your company. Those are things that the generations will look at and go, wow, they may not pay me top dollar, but I like going to work. I like my boss. I like what my company stands for. And so that's where I want to be. That is how you compete with corporate America with limited small business resources, right? So be sure and take a look at that interaction between you and your employees. The reason why is because the general values and priorities of employees are changing. It's now important to have a good work environment, a flexible schedule, as much mobility as possible, work-life blend, because what you're going to find is that some of your employees may want to wiggle their hours around, and you may be okay with that as long as they get the job done. But there are other employees, they want to clock in on time and clock out on time. And that's okay too. Take a look and say, what do I have to offer as far as work-life balance and being able to blend the different generations together. Look and see what kind of social impact that you're having. That becomes more important, whether it's social justice, diversity, all of those things make it it look like your company cares about the industry, the environment, your employees, and all those things kind of add up to people wanting to come work for you. Look at holistic wellness. It's not just about physical wellness, although you want to encourage your employees to go do their wellness exams, right? You want to encourage them to take care of their physical well-being. But employees are now, they're just as aware of mental health as they are of physical health, right? And so they're both important. And financial health. Some people are overwhelmed with just the cost of groceries nowadays. Some people are overwhelmed with debt. It might be credit card debt or student loan debt or something else. But if you're able to offer even something as simple as a consultation with a financial advisor, that might mean a lot to your employee. Providing them with resources, and those resources don't have to cost you a dime, but connecting your employees to value added benefits could keep them working hard for you, keep their motivation and their morale up. Okay, so one thing you got to really check yourself. Multitasking is a myth. It does not exist. Small business owners tend to think, okay, I am an amazing multitasker. And they'll talk to their employees while they're doing 10 other things. What happens is that you don't necessarily feel good about anything that you're doing in particular. You're just doing a lot of it and you're switching in between. That is a surefire way for employees to feel invisible and unvalued. So when you're having conversations with your employees, stop what you're doing, pay attention to them, stop typing, or acknowledge them, and then find another time to talk with them if you're busy. But try to really focus on people instead of your tasks when you need to, right? And if you need to have tough conversations, make sure you're in the right headspace. You don't want to wait until you're furious about something to sit down and have a conversation, because that will just dissolve from there. So a little respect goes a long way, both ways, employees to management, employees. Focus on the other person. Ask, don't tell. That's an important one. Slamming papers down on someone's desk feels aggressive. Sending an email with all caps feels like you're yelling at people. So just be aware of how you're communicating what you need from your employees, and then watch for nonverbal behavior. Your own, right? Make sure that you're not coming across as aggressive or angry. And then also take a look at your employees and say, okay, what is their nonverbal telling me, because sometimes people are very quiet when they're talking to the boss. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're in agreement. So just be aware of that. All right, communication tools, and we'll wrap up here. So here we go. The more personal the conversation, the more effective it is. It's very tempting to send out email blasts to your employees to communicate. That does work for some things, but for a lot of things it does not. It's not a personal touch, certainly not a way to deal with anything that's sensitive or conflict. Okay, but what you don't see on this list, everything from like passing out a brochure to meeting with someone one-on-one, what you don't see in this list are text messages. Where does that fit in the hierarchy, right? And are they personal, right? Are they going to be a turnoff for some of your generations? So take a look at that. I'll tell you, by and large, that one-to-one texts are considered personal, but group texts are kind of like group email blasts. They're not personal. And so if you send out a bunch of group texts to your employees and it contains a lot of information, some of your employees may not even be reading it. All right. So take a look and go, okay, if I'm going to use texting to communicate with my employees or WhatsApp app or whatever, how can I do it in a way that's going to respect the values of the different generations that you're dealing with? Here's an idea. Do your own satisfaction survey. Why not? I've done satisfaction surveys that say, hey, would you prefer DirecTV or cable? Would you prefer Xbox or PlayStation, right? Because that was the industry and the employees that we were working with. So develop your own employee satisfaction survey. You can use a free tool like SurveyMonkey or Google Forms. I really like Google Forms. It doesn't limit the number of attachments, the number of questions that you can have. And it's simple to use. Measure the employee satisfaction of different aspects of your company. Don't just focus on one. Ask employees, do you enjoy your job? Do you feel like your job is challenging, boring? Do you feel like you've received proper training? Ask them, do you feel like you're being paid fairly? Ask them, do you feel like our benefits are competitive? Ask them, and I know it's tough, how you are as a manager. Ask about your company culture, the communication style of your leadership team. And probably most importantly, ask for feedback. If any of your employees have suggestions, listen to them, take them seriously. And you might find that small things make a big difference. And that makes you competitive in the employment world. So take a look. There are a lot of things that you have to offer that you may not even realize it. Employees want to feel important. They want to feel valued and respected. When they feel like that they are appreciated, it makes them want to come in and work hard for you. Look at your schedule. How flexible can you be with your work schedules? Can you do remote? Can you flex time around? Can you do a 4-10? Those little things will start making a big difference in whether or not people want to come work for you and stay working for you. Are you family friendly? Okay, and I'm even going to say it. Are you pet friendly? Are you dog friendly? Right? All those little touch points matter. Warm and fuzzy. Safety. Safety is a big one. It means in terms of job security. Does somebody feel safe showing up to work, like they can work safely and go home? Do they feel like that they've got stability in their workplace, stability in terms of turnover in terms of appropriate training. Employees need to feel safe and secure and like somebody's in control and is not going to leave them out hanging in the wind when push comes to shove. So if they feel nervous or like it's a competitive environment or possibly physically unsafe, they're going to leave right away. That's going to be a deal breaker. Look at your culture. Do you have a diverse mindset culture? Those things are important because inclusion is becoming more and more of a hot topic for more and more of the generations. So to kind of wrap things up, one exercise that you could do with your employees, just as a team building type meeting, is you could give your employees little index cards and have them write on the index cards one moment in their life that they're most proud of, personally or professionally. What's one thing that stands out that was like an amazing moment in their life, one that they'll never forget. They need to write that memory down on a card, right? What happened? Did I graduate college? Whatever the case may be. Did I have my first child? Did I get married? Collect the cards and then shuffle them and hand them back out, making sure that nobody gets their own card, and then have everybody read the cards aloud. What you're going to find is that not people have diverse life experiences, but at the end of the day, people care about the same thing. They care about being able to go to work and go home safely to their families and to be able to take care of their family and friends and enjoy life. So regardless of what generation that you come from, you really have much more in common than what you'd ever imagine. So really focus on what do we have in common as opposed to what are our differences. Take time for you. As a small business owner, you're taking care of everybody, including the business. Sometimes that can take on a life of its own and you can start getting into burnout. Just don't let yourself keep going down that road. And that's one of the reasons why some generations are like, look, I don't want to answer my phone in the evening because I don't want to get burnt out, right? So look at yourself. Am I feeling burnt out? Am I missing my wellness appointments with my doctor? Don't do it. There's only one of you, right? There's only one of you. So take care of your mental and your physical health. Treat yourself to something special. Reward yourself for all your hard work. Do it in a healthy way, but something that you can give yourself a pat on the back with a special treat. And then most importantly, learn when to ask for help. If you're feeling too overwhelmed, burnt out, ask for help, because the thing is that how you are, your wellness as a whole has a lot to do with how you manage and communicate to your employees, and they'll sense it. And that goes a long way in helping you to be able to navigate all the different generations that you may be hiring and learning how to navigate some of the conflicts that can come up in the workplace. I'm not going to go to these sites, we're running out of time, but I just want to say that these are free resources. One is the Texas Business Conference for employers that Texas Workforce Commission puts on. And then the other one is called Especially for Texas Employers. I go into these websites in other sessions and explain them and walk you through them. So look at the other videos to get kind of a tour of what those are about. And then thank you very much for attending. And at this point, I will stop sharing and see if we have any questions or comments. Hopefully everyone's awake.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you,
CJ.
CJ. That was really informational, educational as well. And
Yeah, I was gonna say, CJ, I thought that was really good. Some of it was memory lane there for a bit, which was fun. But you know, it's really interesting to think about that, because sometimes you get caught up in looking at like disc studies and comparison of personalities, but at the end of the day, sometimes it's just generational, right? And that's what it comes down to.
It does, and the thing is that for a small business owner, it could be perplexing because they're wondering, okay, what's influencing how this employee is behaving? Is it personality? Is it generation? And you kind of got to piece it together, and it helps to understand where it comes from too. Because sometimes you're thinking like, are they staying awake at night trying to figure out how to make me miserable? And maybe if you just understand the backstory, it will help you.
thank you again, CJ.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today for this webinar. We will be sending out a survey and getting feedback from you. There are some upcoming webinars, as you can see on the screen. The next one is October 3rd, Master Your Passwords. We have some other ones on QuickBooks. CJ is coming back on the 15th of October as well. You can go to our SBDC website to register for these webinars. You can also get contact information or schedule an appointment with an advisor. You will get resources for small business owners. At this moment, I'd like to thank our funding organizations, the Small Business Administration, the State of Texas, the North Texas SBDC Regional Office, and the North Central Texas College. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. This ends our webinar.